Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Crypto with Pav, where we talk about where the markets have been, where we are, and where we're going. So it's been a bit of an interesting week so far. It's only just started, really. Yeah, I guess we'll sort of recap where we left off last week. But a little bit about me. My name's Pav, lead market analyst at Swyftx. And you might see me writing time to time with the wonderful guys over at Crypto News Australia. Check them out if you haven't already. But yeah, it's an interesting one. So we'll just dive straight in, to be honest. Let me just share my screen. Sea of Green. It's been a good one, hasn't it? But we left the back end of last week, I guess down here, where we started to break down. We had lost this key support trend on Bitcoin, and we talked about being quite concerned, I guess, about that. But then there was always this chance, and this is what I was explaining in my last video, of a relief rally. So whether or not we just came up to here and this took a little bit longer, or we just did what we did, I guess, since what's that, Tuesday last week, we just went boom, straight above this trend line now. Always talked about this move potentially showing that it could rotate into altcoins, and that's where the real potential really sat, just looking at things technically and fundamentally. So we'll go through that, I guess, as well, just sort of explain, why or what that looks like and why it sort of played out the way it has. But in terms of where we are now, we talked about, the top of this sort of peak area here was the March 2022 high, key monthly level. That's always levels of importance, monthly highs. But it's also when the ETF went live. And like I said, I did a article for Crypto News Australia about FTX and how they were sort of reportedly selling up to 22 million shares of the Grayscale BTC product at that time. So about $1 billion US worth of notional value. So that's still yet to be confirmed, the exact numbers that were transacted, what dates, what times, etc. But the idea is that there was that premium where previously there was a discount because the Grayscale product used to be backed by futures product only. Now it's spot. Their ongoing costs and just the way it tracks Bitcoin price has just gotten a lot better. So the sentiment there is that it was worth more almost overnight. So that's what sort of sparked a lot of the Grayscale ETF selling. You can see that in this chart here from CoinGlass, the net flows have been negative, ongoing all the way up until even just the 25th of January. But what's important is, we might have seen the peak of it and it is sort of curling to the upside now. So we'll see what the next week or two has in store, because I think this will be a pretty important one. Only because if you look at other BTC ETFs, like let's look at the iShares product, the inflows have been positive since launch. So that goes to show there is appetite for the Bitcoin ETF. The overall sentiment has been more purchasing by consumers at those levels than selling. So it may just be a temporary little, selling negative sentiment that we're just seeing right now. And that could just be it, right? So that's all we just have to sort of keep on top of this week, in my opinion, just to see how that performs. But for me, what's key, I guess, about where we are right now is, now that we spent all this effort reclaiming this level, and like I said, quite quickly, I wasn't going to be surprised if this dragged on out into February and then just sort of limped and fell over into the Q1 halving. The halving after Q1, just because we have seen Q1 historically has been a sideways market, a bit of chop. So that's kind of what we're just taking as a data point and rolling with. So from here, you'd want to just see, I guess, that just hold here. So while we don't know if this is going to start to make new highs or just start to move into like these clusters here, they're the two, I guess, events that we're sort of maybe looking to see for a bullish narrative. But again, if we just see the market even just move here quite slowly, that's not a bad move either, because if we look at this one here, this is total 3. So this is basically the total market cap of all altcoins minus the market cap of Bitcoin and Ethereum. So really, from a technical perspective, it's your best way of tracking the performance of the altcoin market as a whole. But like anything, we take it with a grain of salt. It's just another data point. It's not something to live and breathe and die by. But this is something I have been tracking for quite a few weeks, specifically since the start of December when we did breach and break this key bear market high. So the fact that we've, I guess, in this week that's just passed, you know, dipped under these lows, but continued to hold and close higher, you could perceive that as a bullish sentiment. That's how I perceive it. And what we could be setting up even just this week is the basis, I guess, for a reversal candle here. So, you know, staying above about $487 billion here on total market cap 3. That could set up potentially the move that takes us to this key level where we've got, I guess, some serious structure that could offer some resistance. So, you know, whether we get this in the coming weeks or we're going to have to see some just meandering and potentially another dip down before we get up into here. I mean, this is an area of interest that I'm looking at. And, you know, me personally, I'm sort of looking at this as an opportunity to take some size off because, you know, if we do get up to here and then even start to see a little bit of a sell-off, you know, that's a 20% move back down. So, you know, you could easily in a pre-bull market or approaching or in an early stage of a bull market, you know, make some gains, and there might be some moves down that you could sort of capitalize by selling off potentially a bit of your short-term investments to then purchase it back at a cheaper rate. So there's nothing to say that this could do this or this could do that or this could do this, like anything's possible. But I guess like what's important is, you know, in these videos, I just hope to track the market the way I'm seeing it, sort of share what I'm seeing. I'm sure you have your own way of potentially looking at the market as well. It's just important to, you know, think about what could be happening, because if anyone sort of tells you they know what's coming, probably reconsider how much you want to listen to what they say, is my take on that. But yeah, I think this week is all about, making sure the bulls that are stepping in, are they here to stay? Or are they just here for a short time, not a good time? And we just start to see the market fall back away again. So like I sort of was saying, a sign of weakness for me is, I mean, we're sort of seeing potentially something play out right now. You know, we've got this high here. You know, if we can't get over that and we start to roll over here and start to fall under here, you might even see this sort of go sideways for a little bit before completely tanking. So, you know, if you're looking at the downside options here, for me, the most obvious area is these previous lows, so coming into that, or even something like this as well. So, you know, you could still be bullish and come into something like this and do that. Like that's totally an option as well. Or you just see a potential move here that's just really thin and we just break under that quite clean and we start to see a breakdown. So if we saw a breakdown, I mean, this whole area here is just ripe for the plucking, specifically just because there would just be a whole bunch of stop losses just cascaded across here. And we've seen in the past when Bitcoin can move down, it can move down quite violently and it just takes out all of these stops. So just to look at, I guess, a few instances in the past, like we've had this region here that's been sort of chopped and taken out. Even just here, you know, seeing that trend get lost, it did fall. And then you've got just here as well. It's a pretty common phenomenon. You know, if you're bullish, a lot of people have opened up even just debt leverage positions, stop losses. They've kind of put it behind previous lows in structure. That's quite normal. So yeah, we could see some sort of liquidity raid. And in that case, you know, you're looking at I'm not really sort of saying we're going here, but yeah, any of these levels here are just as valid as any other. You know, something like 35,500 there looks quite good, just as a bit of an SR inversion area. So we might see price go back there. But I think we're still pretty far away, I hope, unless everything just wants to move really quickly this week, to sort of see if that is going to be a scenario or not. I'm more interested right now to see if we can, you know, get above even this level, put in some higher highs, and from there we can start to see if we're going to form even some sort of trend to the upside. That could be short term, could be long term. That's the thing, could be building, I guess, the next leg up towards, you know, let's say the 2021 December highs. So that's 52K. That could be the next target. Who knows? Or we're just waiting to spend some time here to, I guess, catch some late longs before the market turns to the downside and we see some short buying or some selling really start to take over and we see that roll over. But yeah, that's currently what I'm seeing. But I mean, from a market's perspective, what we've really seen this week that I want to talk about is the complete, I guess, elation in the altcoin market. And you know, if you were like myself looking at, you know, the thesis that I was putting forward last week, I was sort of slowly buying once we were seeing that strength in market and, you know, having an adequate stop loss that I was happy with. But what I'm continuing to see is the infrastructure tokens really still make up the majority of the gains that we're seeing so far. So what I wanted to share today is, Sui, say they've been top performers for quite some time now. Just some things that I noticed about these assets that make me quite interested. So Say in particular, I guess to start off with, it was one of the few recent layer one coins that actually has now put in a new all-time high. So it's in what's called price discovery. So price discovery in crypto is quite interesting sort of as a phenomenon, especially when the market's gaining momentum. So traditionally, like you'll notice here, prices sort of consolidating, ranging. A lot of traders, investors, they're sort of looking to the left here to see potential highs, lows, to get in, to get out. Essentially manage their positions, lack of a better word. But when you move into price discovery, there's nothing to the left except for the price action that you've just put in recently. So, any breaks above, the highs, there's usually lots of buying, or there's lots of people getting bought into traps. Like it goes both ways. But when you're following, I guess, the general market trend, like, we do with like something like Total 3, if Total 3 is in the middle of a range and we've got some potential upside targets, and say is starting to break out, maybe not an unreasonable thing to look at as setting up a trade with adequate stop loss for further upside. It's all about momentum. So if the current momentum is in something like say, you want to try and capture and follow that momentum. Sui, quite similar in terms of like functionality. Layer one, also a new layer one coin that has yet to really, I guess, go live in its ecosystem. So this one's interesting because it hasn't made new price like highs, new, oh my God, just lost the ability to talk, has not entered price discovery just yet. But what's interesting is if you actually, so this is how I like to sometimes work out, which one I'm going to buy. Because let's face it, a lot of people make the mistake of purchasing way too many assets. They've got too many things to manage and they just don't know what's going on at any given time. There's no way a single person can manage 20, 30 assets at once. Like it's just unreasonable unless you're living and breathing crypto every single minute. But what you can actually do in something like TradingView, so we can see here with these charts, with Say and Sui individually, they're measured against Tether, USDT, so US dollars. So when this is going up, it's basically suggesting that Say or Sui is outperforming the US dollar, which is kind of like your stable, you want to outperform the dollar, essentially to be an on-risk asset at the end of the day. So if you actually pair one of them over the other, so let's say we've got Sui USDT, we can divide that by Say USDT. And what we're seeing is almost just like a aggregated performance index. So plainly, just simply put, when this is moving up, Sui is doing better than Say. And when it's moving down, Say is doing better than Sui. So, just speaking from personal experience, I've been following these charts for some time, and I was noticed that there was a higher time frame break on a chart like this, and again, you just take it as a data point. It itself isn't alone enough to probably take a trade. You definitely want to do fundamental research into these projects as well, understand the team, what they're trying to build, etc., what's their track record, all that stuff. But for me, an area of interest was definitely here when I started to see that there might be a turning of the tides, and started to see that Sui was outperforming Say, which has been absolutely on a tear this whole year. I mean, if we even just look at, let's just even take the start of the year. I guess that would be here. I guess it's currently sitting up 34%, but this was really one of the ones that took off as the early bull market started, or the early runs that we saw now that we're leading into the bull market, whatever you want to call it, in October. It's up to the tune of like a 6x. So not to say you're going to see the same returns on Sui as you did in Say, but it kind of does suggest that the rotation of capital might be moving to this layer one project now that there's been a sufficient move into Say already. And this works with any asset. So another one you can look at that I like to do quite often is Sol, just because Sol has been so prolific throughout this cycle. It's outperforming ETH. It's by far showing the most healthiest metrics in terms of like growth, in terms of users, DEX trading volumes, all that jazz. Even seeing it start to make higher highs against Sol is enough to potentially warrant, this isn't a new asset that might be starting to catch a bid, trying to catch some momentum. So as long as the general trend and technicals look fine for something like Sui, which, the way I like to view the market, it's still all intact. We're definitely on the outside of, something like this, like a parallel channel. As long as that's maintained, we see actions like this where the midpoint starts to save That's the bull stepping in effectively as the way I perceive the market. The trend's intact. So you just ride the trend until the trend tells you otherwise. Well, that's what I'm doing at least. So that's, I guess, more than anything, just my way of hopefully giving some sort of value to you guys. You know, it can be quite daunting when you see such a green day. You think, oh, I've missed it, rah, rah, rah. The truth is, as long as the momentum is going to stay in the market, which is what we're hoping to see with Bitcoin over the coming days into the next week's close, it's likely that if you do potentially look at assets that are still outperforming other assets in the market, you could still see that sustained continued momentum because the underlying momentum in the market hasn't changed. It hasn't shifted, right? So that's kind of like, I guess, what I'm trying to explain there. So I hope that made sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I might try again another time. But that's something you may or may not have seen that, you know, I kind of wanted to run through today. Looking forward as well, like, you know, we've talked about what do we want to see moving forward here. You know, we want to see potentially price stay and hold above here, or we're going to be observing and see if it starts to lose here. There's some macroeconomic head or tailwinds yet to be seen that we could see. Now, something like a macro calendar might seem quite boring and pointless to a lot of people, but the truth is markets love certainty. It just bodes, I guess, confidence. There's less to have to worry about of what if this, what if that. A lot of traders and investors will stay flat as well. A lot of the big money potentially until some of these big ticket items are ticked off. So the big ones for me this week is the US federal funding rate, where they talk about what the new issued update to interest rates is, as well as the British bank rate as well. So both are pegging no change there. So just from a global sentiment perspective, if nothing's changing and that's what's expected, that's what's getting priced in right now. So the fact that we're seeing an uptrend potentially develop could sort of suggest if we do see the same outcome as what's forecasted, the trend may not be interrupted. But what's never priced in, this little guy here, the statements. So there'll always be an official sort of statement, remark from the committee, from the teams, sort of talking about, is the country on track? Do we need to do more tightening, or conversely, do we need to start loosening? And that's something that the market will have to respond to after the news is released. And yeah, that's where you get your volatility, long story short. So, you know, an outcome there, if they start talking about, you know, they start giving some sort of timeline as to when interest rate cuts might come, that's going to be perceived as quite a dovish or bullish outcome. And we might see movements in the market that we weren't expecting. So just an uptick in volatility. Conversely, you know, they have talked about rate cuts coming in 2024. If all of a sudden they start getting a bit sort of standoffish and saying, well, we're not sure if we're going to do as many rate cuts as we initially planned, that's when the alarm bells start to ring, and you might see just a negative sentiment start to really brew on the market, and you get volatility to the downside, for example. So they're the kind of things that I'll be looking for, and that's Thursday. So there's potential that, you know, if we've seen quite a bit of movement earlier this week, through the middle of this week, we might just go a bit quiet until the sort of news does land. May not happen, just a possibility. And then another one I like to follow, I guess, is unemployment rates. That does affect the strength of the US dollar currency, which is important. Everything in crypto is measured in USD, so you can follow that one too. And then ISM manufacturing PMI. So PMI is like a survey that they do with purchasing managers. It's probably the most, I guess, accurate depiction of the current state of the economy. There's usually done between both manufacturing and services. Excuse me. But long story short, with the surveying, they create a index, and anything above 50 basically describes industry expansion, so growth, that's bullish. Under 50 is essentially contraction, so that's just sort of saying things could be better. But they're probably the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I'll be keeping an eye on, just because I have noticed personally that it does drive a bit of volatility. And it sort of coincides with days in the week that generally are either trend continuation or trend reversal days. So your Thursdays and your Fridays. So just another point there as well. In terms of another thing to really keep an eye on is the monthly close. So I'm just going to pull up another chart just so we've got a clean workspace to work with for some squiggling. So if we look at Bitcoin, we really don't want it to close ideally under the previous monthly high, specifically because that generally is perceived in market as a sign of weakness. So I can show you this move here, this move here. So back at the top of each peak that we had in the last run, we had this phenomenon where price ran higher on a monthly time frame, but failed to close above. So the candle close was below the previous high. And you can see this reproduced quite frequently in the market. It generally is a sign of weakness, plainly and simply. So, you know, this technical factor plus potentially more fundamental factors around it, like let's say Q1 expectancy being a bit lower than what Q2 and Q4 are historically for Bitcoin in a halving year. And also just the halving itself, there is notable volatility leading up to it as well. Maybe enough for it to sort of potentially then in February put in a red month. Pretty similar to what we did in July and August. You know, we could see 2 months of red months before we then put in some sort of reversal month before the next leg up starts. Like that's a pretty reasonable thing to assume that is possible. If you're a bull and you're just trying to think about every potential bullish scenario, for me, it's staying above 42,288 here on the Coinbase chart. So the significance there is we haven't put in a close that's lower than the previous month. So you could theoretically then sort of watch on, you know, weekly, daily timeframes to see what price is doing and if it's showing any more further weakness or we're seeing strength. That's something to keep an eye on. What is worth mentioning is that we have just recently put in a sweep of some pretty key lows with this weekly close that we just had. As you can see right here, I'll just make that solid so it's a bit easy to see, just like that. So that's pretty significant. And I can show you some examples in the past. I'll just forget that. Where we have done similar things, and you can sort of see for yourself what has happened in the past. So this is on a weekly time frame again, where we've had a sweep of a previous low before we've had a big move higher. Over here as well, sweep before we've gone higher, and this is on a weekly time frame. And again, even just here, we've got a sweep before going higher. So they're basically just moments in the market where it has been stretched and you're either choosing the bulls or bears need to choose who's in control. Like that's the best way to think about it when you're at weekly extremes like this. So usually when you do that, price tends to move to the other end of the last, you know, if you take out the weekly lows, you go for the weekly highs. So the weekly highs of interest are this guy here and the next one, which is this guy here. So these are also two other weekly levels that I'll be keeping a close eye on. They're potential areas where if you can't stay above them, you could be turning around, quite simply put. Pretty similar to what we saw here. Great example. So we had this sell-off. We had this weekly bullish action. We had a massive bullish move in a whole week where we just basically undid, what's that? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 weeks of just chop going up and down, up and down. And 1 week it just went boom, straight to the top. But it still rolled over. So, you know, you can have a big week like that and still you're not out of the weeds. And that would have caught a lot of people expecting that to continue and be the next big leg up. So that's what I'd be saying to be very mindful of and careful of. Just the weekly highs there as well. So just definitely keep those marked out and paying attention to them. But other than that, I think if we can at least half save this monthly candle and the weekly candle stays, I guess, relatively intact, I don't see why we can't go higher, at least for a little bit longer. And even for me, as I've sort of said, you know, with Bitcoin, we don't necessarily need to see it go higher for altcoins to still have some time in the sun to play. And that's, I guess, my key takeaway out of what the current narrative, in my opinion, is, that there is potentially more, I guess, opportunity and room to move in the altcoin market than there may be in Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin, you could be chopping and, chasing for, less than 10% gains. If we were to, let's just say, come back to this structure as like the next key level, so that's a 5% move. Whereas like if Bitcoin were to just continue sort of hovering and the altcoin market is just potentially seeing new inflows, just rotations out of a lot of Bitcoin positions into altcoins, which is, best described by tracking something like Bitcoin dominance. just to sort of chop and change and move around everywhere right now. I know it's a bit confusing potentially. But yeah, if we were to see this start to stagnate or roll over, Bitcoin dominance, so the total amount of market cap that Bitcoin is occupying, that could be, again, like a very bullish headwind for altcoins as well. But I don't know if we'll quite see that yet. I still think that could have a big move to 60% as well before we start to see the real altcoin market take off. But I think I've covered everything. And just as a leaving remark, just on the whole ETF saga, Hong Kong has also going to list its own first spot ETF. So they've always been very accommodating for cryptos. They probably have one of the most, clearest legislations towards how people can get exposure to crypto when you look at other developed nations out there. But 10th of February is when they're pegging that their spot ETF may be approved by. Just looks like it will be expedited by the Securities and Futures Commission there. But that's an interesting one as well, just showing that the global narrative at the moment seems to be spot ETF. And yeah, we've sort of seen that, spot ETFs will actually create actual purchasing of real Bitcoin, so that will have an impact on market dynamics. So it'd be an interesting one to see there as well, especially with the whole narrative in China right now around monetary easing, stimulus there as well. So if investors are more confident in China than they ever have been, because they've had a pretty grim 1 to 2 years. I think the whole stock market's down to the tune of 50% in the last 2 years. So it's been pretty rough for them. That could be, again, something else that sparks a flame outside of the US as well. So very, very interesting one to watch sort of play out, in my opinion. So that's, I guess, a lot of information. Hopefully not speed run too rushed, but hopefully you can take away something from that. I guess we'll just watch this week and see what plays out. I think it'd be very important to know if this move is going to last in altcoins, or if this is just a quick flash in the pan and we're back to where we were 2 weeks ago within a few days. We'll just have to wait and see. But thanks for catching me, Guy. If you like what you're seeing, like and subscribe. Let your friends know that where they can get some juicy insights and hopefully some unbiased takes on what's happening in the market right now. So hopefully something of value for you guys out there. But catch you again soon. Cheers.